Everybody, happy Tuesday. Hope you are all having a great day so far. I am earlier than last week, so that is good. Today we are going to be talking about how the spring affected the vines, how a cool spring shows itself in the clusters. So you can see what the precursors of a vintage is and how it is showing itself in the vineyard today. So the 2023 vintage has really been an interesting one so far. Right? I'm not ready to call it a winemaker's vintage because there's still some really great positive things that are going on, but it is definitely an intriguing one. So we started off the season with an incredible amount of rain during the winter months. We actually saw over 28 inches of rain from January through May, and that's over double the average of what we typically should see or what we typically see. And now the remaining spring months have been uncharacteristically cool, and what this does is it delayed bloom, flowering, it delayed fruit set, and now everything in the vineyard is behind schedule. So the first thing we're going to talk about is flowering. So grapevines are scientifically known as having perfect flowers. And what perfect flowers mean, the opposite is an imperfect flower. And what that means is that it has both the male and female reproductive organs in a single plant, in a single vine. So an imperfect flower needs another plant. So like apples are imperfect, right? You need a female apple plant and a male apple plant, and then you're going to rely on the wind or insects or something to have the pollen come from the male plant over to the female plant and allow fertilization to occur. In a perfect flower, since it contains both the stamen and the pistil on a single plant, they can actually pollinate themselves, and that's what a grapevine is. Now, in either situation, basically what has to happen is the pollen has to be removed from the stamen part, which is the male part of the flower, and it needs to land on the pistil part, which is the female part. And then that pollen actually has to travel down the style and into the ovary, where it can then fertilize fertilize the ovary so that we can get some fruit. So this is really an important time for the vine. So when this occurs, we get bloom, we get flowering. And grapes, they typically flower in early May. And it's not difficult to just walk through the vineyard and not even see them. It's not like they're beautiful flowers, but they are rather fragrant. So if you're walking through the vineyard during that bloom time, you can smell it, but you can easily walk by and not really see the flowers. As you can see in the image, they're really, really tiny, okay? But as I said, they are extremely vulnerable to the elements during this time. So they have a very short time span which they can successfully be fertilized. So during the spring, during a cooler weather, flowering was delayed by like more than 10 days. And then it took almost 3 to 4 weeks for the bloom, for the fertilization to be complete. And that in a normal vintage, in a nice warm vintage, this flowering can take place in less than a week, like 4 to 7 days. So now you're expanding this vulnerability state out to over multiple weeks. And when that happens, more damage can occur. Okay, so during this time, the temperature was pretty cool here in Paso, and many of the days were really low into the 60s, and this created that longer bloom time here in Paso, which means that more vulnerability to the elements. We don't want wind, we don't want water or rain, we just want beautiful, perfect weather. So cool weather along with the rainy or windy environments, they can significantly damage those precious little itty bitty flowers that you're seeing here. And when that happens, they can't fertilize. And when the grapevine can't fertilize, the plant goes into like a rescue mode and says, oh my God, I have these berries that are growing that don't even have seeds in them, and I can't even use them to extend to the next generation. So what they do in order to preserve that energy is they just drop those unwanted berries, those berries that don't have the seeds in them. And that leads to shatter. So shatter, remember that the whole purpose of the reproductive stage of the vine is to reproduce, right? To give its genes to the next generation. If the berry isn't fertilized, it doesn't have a seed, and without a seed, it's kind of worthless to that grapevine. It's not going to give any DNA to the next generation. So when the vine drops it, all it does is leave the peduncle. And that peduncle looks like the children's game of jacks. And that's where it got its name from. It can also be called as colure. But by dropping these unfertilized berries, the vine is able to retain some energy and put it into the berries that can carry on that life cycle. So they're getting rid of the berries that can't produce the next generation and putting all of their energy into the berries that can. So that's the bad news, right? We have jacks, we have not large, we don't have clusters filled with the berries, but here's the good part of it, okay? Shatter doesn't really affect the quality of the berries that are left on the vine. In fact, what it actually can do is improve it. Since there are less berries on each cluster, what that means is negative, it's going to be less tonnage. We're not going to get as much fruit as we would like to get, but positive, the fruit that is on the bunches are going to be extremely healthy. So with less berries on each bunch, the overall ripening will most likely become more uniform, and that also helps us in that decision making of when to harvest. Because lots of times when you're harvesting, some clusters are they have overripe berries and underripe berries, and you have to decide of when is that perfect or that ideal time to harvest. But if all of the berries on that cluster are ripening at the same rate because there's less of them, it's an easier decision to harvest. So what this means is it's going to be a light tonnage, it's going to be a light harvest for 2023, but the fruit is going to be exceptional, so it's going to be a great vintage. But for you, the consumer, what that means is you might want to check out your favorite wineries upon release, because there's probably not going to be a lot of case production from each of these wines. All right, so I hope that helps you out in seeing kind of the relationship of how earlier weather relates to what you can see in the vineyard. And if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to cover, please leave a comment, save, like, do all that good stuff so that you can come back to this video when you have other questions about what shatter is or jacks, or you hear these terms being thrown out and you don't quite remember. And remember, we are located at the corner of Pine and 13th Street. We are closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, open other days. Appointments are not necessary, but fully, truly are appreciated. Making an appointment is the only way that you can get a taste of our entire lineup. Walk-ins only get a portion of our lineup. So have a great week. The temperature is warming up, so we're going to start seeing things going quicker in the vineyard. Stay tuned for our channel, because I have pictures of our two different vineyards showing kind of the differences. And we have some nice little surprise in the tasting room now for your fur babies that finally came in. So have a great week, and I will see you soon. Sláinte!